And welcome back to another episode of the Big Red with B Schneid Show. I'm joined by two co-workers of mine, Alex Berry and Anthony Rubek, who have been on the show before. Be sure to follow them on Twitter. They got their handles linked right there. But anyway, boys, Nebraska released their depth chart on Friday, and I was just kind of wondering what your guys' analysis was. I mean, you can kind of see it up on the screen right here. It's not the best picture. What were some things that kind of jumped out to you?
Yeah, for sure. There's still a lot of oars on it. Obviously, the tackle positions are still up in the air right now. Didn't get that much clarity with that. But I mean, really, a big standout comes just in the backup quarterback with TJ Lateef being listed ahead of Jalen Gramstad, no or next to his name either. He's a freshman who has had a great camp, and really, a lot of people have been thinking that he would eventually end up as the number two quarterback by the end of the season. So just seeing the first depth chart of the year, and he's already got that number two spots. Very intriguing for sure.
Yeah, I'm with Anthony there. When I saw that quarterback as no or, I totally expected to be an or with Lateef and Gramstad there, just because I honestly thought that Gramstad would be the number two guy. Because I know Rule spoke really highly on Lateef this past week about his improvement, but I thought Gramstad's leadership and him being a senior and knowing the playbook more would get him that number two role. And with there not being an or, I mean that could still change depending on what the game's looking like. But I mean, yeah, Lateef at number two is definitely something to take a look at, because even if he doesn't get any playing time this year, if anything happens to Raiola in the future, him only being a freshman could help out so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to feel really good about Latif's emergence, especially just because there is a chance that Dylan Raiola could be out for a game or two, just going off of historical seasons, especially with Nebraska quarterbacks. I know he played in all the games last year, but when he went down against UCLA last year, Nebraska was screwed. So that was definitely, I was really intrigued by Williams Winery being listed with an or next to Cam Lenhart. And then the jack position caught my eye. I know we've heard a lot about Jordan Ochoa throughout fall camp, but he jumped Willis McGahee, who I think could, I mean, or I was thinking was going to be right there with McCullough splitting reps.
Yeah, Willis McGahee had a great year last year. Obviously, he had limited playing time, but he really did show a lot when he was on the field, especially in that Pinstripe Bowl. But McGahee really, they didn't talk about him that much at all throughout camp. It was all Jordan Ochoa and just the strides he's made. So I definitely see the jet position as a highlight for Nebraska this year. Obviously, Deshaun McCullough as well, being the starter there. But yeah, they're going to be they can have two jacks on the field at the same time, and it's very interesting to see Ochoa leapfrog McGahee already.
Yeah, I'm also with you there, and I even think that nose guard battle between Judy and Van Poppel. I'm pretty high on Van Poppel personally. I think he deserved every part of that single digit jersey. But I mean, Judy's a senior, but I think they will go neck and neck and be almost that Robinson and Nash duo there. I think they're both absolutely beasts. I mean, you see 300 pounds each. I think they could definitely do a lot of damage this year.
You mentioned nose guard. Huffkin actually made the depth chart, which I wasn't even thinking he'd be listed on the three deep. But I think that Van Poppel jumps Judy. I'm not sold on Elijah Judy. He's been here a couple years and never really played a significant role. I'm not saying he won't play, but I don't envision him taking the Ty Robinson jump, him being the guy. I think Van Poppel is your guy in the middle to do that. And then at defensive tackle, you also have Keona Davis. So I think those are your two guys. And that we keep hearing about Jalen George too. So I think about a month in the season, I think those will be your main defensive tackles is Van Poppel, Jalen George, and Keona Davis.
Yeah, I was surprised that there wasn't an or already next to Judy and Van Poppel in this initial depth chart. But I agree, this is a very big question mark for the defense, given, losing probably two of the best players on your defense. Ty Robinson was the best player on the team last year, but they've talked a lot. Keona Davis has looked great so far in camp, and so has Jalen George after missing the spring. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it turns out. But I agree. I think Judy will be a nice depth piece for sure, but I think the upside on Van Poppel will definitely show early on this year, and he'll definitely take that position, I think, going forward.
And I think what's important to note here is the amount of youth on this team. I mean, we saw, I think Nebraska is, or if not, one of the most underclassmen on the roster, something like that. So this is week 1. This might look completely different in week, 10 or 11 with, there's not really, of course there's leadership with the seniors, but when you have battles between sophomores and freshmen for the first and second team, that could fluctuate so much in every position.
Yeah, you got to take a lot of this with kind of a grain of salt, especially because they're releasing a depth chart a week before they play Cincinnati. Cincinnati's going to look at that. I do want to go back to the defensive line, specifically Williams Nwaneri. He was a guy that when he committed, people were thinking, wow, this guy has a lot of upside. And then he kind of went quiet, and it was kind of said that he wasn't really there yet. But you'd see him, at an open practice doing drills, and you're like, yeah, that's the most athletically gifted guy on the whole football team. But he's there now. So I think for Nebraska's defensive line, you have to feel 10 times better than you did 3 weeks ago just by Williams Nwaneri alone. Because if that guy's already jumped Cam Lenhart or neck and neck with him, that's huge in my opinion.
Yeah, Matt Rule talked today about Nwaneri, saying that he's a completely different football player than he was in the spring, which is definitely encouraging to hear as a guy who has all the talent in the world, just insane potential, has 4 years of eligibility if he wants it at Nebraska. And just to see him already with a guy like Cameron Lenhart, who's been with the program for 3 years now, and he's been a consistent player throughout his time there. So to see him neck and neck with him in that starting defensive end discussion, it's very, very encouraging.
I think it's hard to not, as a fan, to not like someone when you see that they're listed at 6'7", 265 pounds as a freshman. So yeah, I think that Nwaneri and Lenhart battle is going to be one to watch. But
they're both going to play. That's not. I think that Van Poppel's going to jump Judy. Judy's still going to play at nose tackle. It's just a matter of, I think, production wise, when it's a fourth quarter and it's a 3-point ball game, who are they trotting out there? I think Van Poppel is your guy. And clearly it looks like McCullough and Ochoa might be those guys if they're doing 2 jacks at the moment over McGahee, which I still believe McGahee, they mentioned they're doing 2 jack looks. They're going to play 3 jack linebackers. But that's very intriguing, and then we look at the inside linebackers. We all assumed and found out that it's Javen Wright, clear-cut starter, and then, of course, they got the Orby Watson, Trenton Shavers, who are going to be playing probably at least 40 snaps apiece as well. So that's pretty set in stone. If you guys want to add some comments on what you saw from the inside backers, we can, or we could jump to the secondary.
Yeah, I'll just add it's interesting with Vincent Shavers' Rule talking today that he's day-to-day with just a lingering hamstring issue that's been with it for a while, but he wasn't too concerned about it at all. He said, I know V9, I know I can count on him, and I wouldn't be too worried on that. And it's just really a really stacked room as you have, Shavers, who already played so much as a freshman and really broke out in that Pinstripe Bowl. And then when you add in a guy like Watson Trent, who's a Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year, to go along with Javen Wright, who again just has years of experience under his belt. So it's definitely going to be a position group I'm looking forward to watching this year.
Yeah, I think you hit every point there. It's just going to be it's going to be fun watching both of them. You can't go wrong with either. You saw how Shavers performed in the bowl game. Very promising. You got Watson Trent, a senior with all these accolades. you can't really ask for much more. So just hoping that Shavers can stay healthy.
Yeah. And let's talk about secondary. Be sure to shoot us a comment, though, from what you guys are thinking. We'd like to be getting back to them and answering them, especially as next week when we preview Nebraska versus Cincinnati. Secondary, though, we found out, or they confirmed, of course, the top 5 defensive backs, which we knew, Marshall and right at the corners, and then Buford, Hartzog, and Singleton at the safety. But a guy that got mentioned was Rex Guthrie, the safety. Rule really praised him. I mean, saying that dude is a starting Big Ten safety. And then, of course, we got to hear about Caleb Benning, Donovan Jones. But as this group shapes out, I mean, I think that there are 9 guys in that total, including your 5 starters, that can play a role. And I think that's huge for Nebraska from what you saw last year when they had UCLA, Jeremiah Charles, a redshirt freshman, out there getting torched. And then let's point out, USC last year when everybody was lobbing over Hartzog. Well, now you have Jameer Khan there, that if Hartzog is getting picked apart, well, they let Matt go somewhere else and go with Khan.
Yeah, and they've been really high on Khan this fall camp. They've talked about him a lot and just the strides he made. Another guy who missed spring with injury, came back ahead of schedule, and has really looked the part at nickel. So that's going to be interesting to see going forward. And Rule, again, spoke highly a lot on these reserve secondary players today. You mentioned Rex Guthrie, Donovan Jones. He mentioned that he's going to be on the field a lot. There's a lot of packages that have him in there. So it's going to be very fun to see this defensive back room, see how these young players have progressed since last year. Jeremiah Charles had that bad game against UCLA, got the start, ended up getting benched after the first drive. But now, if that experience under his belt, he's back again as a number 2 cornerback. So we'll see if he's able to make those adjustments heading into this year.
Yeah, I mean, those 4 secondary positions, what's so nice is I think all those guys can play every position. I believe we saw Amari Sanders in the bowl game for a little bit. Am I right?
Yeah.
I think that was him. And I thought from what I saw, he looked pretty good. Like, I feel confident with him. So seeing him as listed as number 3 cornerback I think he has all the potential in the world from what I've seen. And so, yeah, I think Jeremiah Charles definitely has his work cut out for him with him behind him.
My biggest question is when they go into an actual dime package, let's say it's 3rd and 16, so they trot out 6 defensive backs. Do they throw in Jameer Khan or do they go Donovan Jones? Because I think those are the next 2 up. I mean, one goes down. I mean, yeah, they know they have Jameer Khan listed as nickel, but I could see him going either way with them too. But I think that is your top 7 with those 2 right there. I mean,
yeah, I agree. I think they will also go with Jones in those kind of situations. He's a guy who played a lot in the bowl game and is a guy that, was cornerback last year, moved to safety earlier this year, and now is back at the corner position. He's a guy where Rule thinks you can play kind of wherever is needed on the field. And I think he'll definitely be on the field a lot, even if it's not as a starting corner, as a starting safety. They'll definitely work him into their game plans and packages for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the offense. Let's talk about the tackle really quick. We touched on it when I started the show, but Rule pointed out that if it was today, they wouldn't start Pritchett. We've also heard word that Pritchett's been still working with the ones in practices. It could be just kind of a thing to get after Cincinnati. But I think that it's Gatula's job to lose right now. The way he spoke. I mean, I don't know why we go up there and say that is my thing.
Yeah, I guess maybe as a way to motivate Pritchett, but still, just the fact that this became such a story and such a position battle, something that none of us expected going into the fall. We thought that, it would be Pritchett's job to lose, and he has kind of left tackle all locked up from there. But Gunnar Gatula, he played a lot last year. He's earned the right to fight for a starting job, and him and then Turner Corcoran also back now from injury, being added to that left tackle battle. It's going to be very interesting to see, who gets the start against Cincinnati and if there's any changes made throughout the game.
Yeah, and sometimes they say they list them in alphabetical order with the oars, but if you look at it, it's not. So I think Artula is going to get the first snap, and I think Teddy's going to get the first snap at right. But then again, we might see the second series a totally different left tackle. So, and I don't rule out Pritchett. He's still going to play a role for Nebraska. But I think the biggest question for Nebraska's fan base is this going to be another Micah Mazuka type of thing where he's talented, but and Rule pointed out that he ain't having anything off the field. He put that to rest. But is it going to be one of those bust linemen from the portal that were supposed to be a starter? Is my thing.
Yeah, it very well could be. I mean, I know coming in when Husker fans heard that we were getting an Alabama starting left tackle, that he started for Alabama, but he had these issues with these holding calls and false starts, and that's what Matt Rule kind of spoke on today. Is that's kind of his issue is he might be the strongest one out there at left tackle, but if you're making these small mistakes that have big impacts on the game, I mean, if you have a holding call, once a drive, that's not really going to help the team out. So I think what they want in the offense there is someone who limits those penalties, because we know in the years past, holding false starts have been the death of Nebraska. So I think Pritchett will definitely see the field, like you said, but I think I would agree. I think it's Gatula's job to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good problem for Nebraska to have. Remember last year when Teddy Prohaska retore his ACL, MCL, whatever. He always basically was always just a knee injury, but there was a lot of panic, I think. And then, of course, Corcoran goes down against Illinois, and you're relying on Gatula. Now you have all those guys healthy, and you add in a Pritchett, and then Tyler Kanak is there. You have 5 guys you could potentially be starting. And I mean, that's been talked about all offseason, but I think that the strength depth wise of the team is the offensive line. I'd say the offensive line has more depth strength than even the receiving core. And that might be a little bold to say, but I'll stand behind it.
Yeah, and then they just got a lot of experience. I mean, Gatula is really the only underclassman in kind of that those guys you mentioned that, and he still even had playing time last year. He started a lot of games then. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. They mentioned Gatula, and I'm sure it's the case for a lot of these other guys who, he might be at left tackle right now, but he can go over and play right tackle if needed. So it's a good problem to have for sure. A lot of flexibility on that offensive line. And they have high hopes going into this year. Rocco Spindler talking about winning the Joe Moore Award and stuff like that. So they look the part. They just got to play the part now.
Well, anyway, so let's talk about something Anthony and I have kind of been going back and forth about with this, but the tight end room. And I know Luke Lindenmeyer is listed the number 1, but I still wholeheartedly believe that by the end of the season, the leading tight end receiver is going to be Heinrich Haarberg. Now, some people say, he is switching a new position, but you can't coach athleticism that Heinrich Haarberg has, and I've seen him attempt to block before. I am confident Heinrich Haarberg is the leading receiver. I predict at least 500 to 600 receiving yards as a vertical threat. And I'm not saying, Luke's going to be the starter, but when it's passing down situations, I think Heinrich Haarberg's your guy.
I still don't know about that, man. I know, sure, say what you want about, Luke Lindenmeyer will still definitely have a spot in this offense. And if you are talking about receiver upside, while Luke Lindenmeyer is definitely an underrated receiver, Heinrich Haarberg is just more athletic in that realm. But still, 500 to 600 yards, I think, is a big ask and a pretty wild statement considering Nebraska did not even have a 600-yard receiver last year. Now, of course, Raiola will likely have more passing yards this year with a year under his belt, but still, I feel like might be a little too out there, Bobby.
Alex, what's your opinion?
I kind of want to hear this keep going. I want to see what you guys.
Oh, here's my thing. When they go 12 personnel, when Luke's in, he's going to be the quick, wise stick threat. Don't get me wrong. And he's going to be good at it. And Luke is by far the best blocking tight end on the team. It's not even close. And overall, all around, he probably is the best tight end on the team because he can catch the ball. But when they go 12 personnel and they bring in a Heinrich Haarberg alongside him, Dylan will be throwing the Dane and Ja'Cory in 11 personnel a lot of the time, is my thing, and Isaiah Hunter, a Cortez Mills. But they're going to be, as the game goes along, I think they're going to be double teaming those type of guys. Let's say Dane Key rips off 2 40-yard catches in the first half. Well, in the second half, that's gonna change because they're going to be double teamed. And I think that's where you see the tight end seam up the middle of the field. And all I'm saying, think about former quarterbacks that switched to tight end. Travis Kelce, Taysom Hill, you can put an asterisk, but the Vanderbilt tight end, you see it all the time. I know that it's his first year playing tight end, but I full-heartedly believe Heinrich Haarberg will do that. And it could be Carter Nelson, the guy that really emerges as the seam threat. And I think they both could be. So it's a great problem for Nebraska to have. And obviously, yeah, there is a concern about, are they going to be able to line up in 12 personnel and down block? But looking at the athleticism that Heinrich Haarberg believes, 22 miles per hour, 6'5", 230 pounds, I don't see many safeties being able to contest him.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see just how the tight ends play against Cincinnati, how the looks they're getting. But Carter Nelson really is a guy who is kind of been this odd man out, at least in just our little hypotheticals here. But he's a guy who obviously had that offseason surgery, so don't know how recovered he is from that. And he was a receiver last year as well. But that dude is as good as an athlete as anyone is. And I think he can definitely even kind of maybe break into that Heinrich Haarberg role you're talking about as just a guy down the seam. But it's going to be fun to watch these tight ends. I have high expectations for the room as a whole. I know a lot of Husker fans are worried about that. I think that the tight end room, they might not, have stats that jump out to you, but I think overall they're a very consistent group that should definitely at least just do their part well, whether it's blocking or, Luke, I think, is going to be a great short yardage receiver and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can see a world where, last year you saw Heinrich Haarberg was in a bunch of different packages just to kind of throw off the defense when he was still kind of in that quarterback role transitioning. Now he'll have more of a workload than last year now that he's full-time tight end. I do see Luke taking most of the snaps, at least to start off with, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Heinrich have, 50 to 65 yards a game just off those third down packages.
Hey, if he got 50 yards a game, that'd be 700 yards by the end of the year.
That's okay. Maybe it's a little.
That's what I see the path is what I'm saying. I'll look at old film when Ben Cotton and Kyler Reed are playing together. Luke Lindenmeyer is a Ben Cotton type tight end. He can catch. He made some clutch catches. Everybody kind of remembers the Northwestern on the road when Nebraska came back from down, I believe, 17 in the fourth quarter, made the game-winning catch. And I'm not saying Luke could be that guy, but Kyler Reed wasn't necessarily utilized in the best way at Nebraska, in my opinion. But I see Heinrich Haarberg and Carter Nelson. Maybe they both have 350 yards. All I'm saying, I see a path. I would not be shocked if by the end of the season, honorable mention, all Big Ten tight end because of his receiving stats for Heinrich Haarberg. Future NFL draft pick. I'm living by it.
I definitely think the tight ends will have more just an expanded role out of the gate now with Holgorsen at the helm. As last year, really, yes, they had Borkature and Lindenmeyer, and they started getting catches towards the end of the year. It was really just Thomas Fidone out there at the start of the year, and he was kind of really the only tight end out there unless throw in Luke and Nate Borkature for blocking. So I'm definitely interested to see, how involved these tight ends are in the offense.
Well, and you point out Thomas Fidone. I think that's what Nebraska fans have right now is Fidone syndrome because they've been hyped up about these big guys. And I think even Carter Nelson now is getting that backlash is, they got the top tight end in the country, and then they come to Nebraska, get injured, and don't produce what they were supposed to or projected to produce wise. But anyway, we can ramble on about that tight end talk, and we probably will all week until we get a game. But, we got to see the receivers. We already knew who the top three were. And then, of course, Quinn Clark we saw really emerge. Coach has been praising him. Of course, Bonner's a single digit. He'll be in that rotation. Cortez Mills, we know, is a freshman. I mean, that room, they got 8 guys that all can play, it looks like. And I like I said, I think that the offensive line is the most deep on the team, but wide receiver is neck and neck with them.
Yeah, for sure. They were talking about these 6 guys throughout camp and how Quinn Clark was the 6th guy. And even looking at the 7th and 8th, you have Keelan Smith, who has had a great camp so far. He was the standout player of the Big Red Preview open practice. And then Jeremiah Jones just looks like a man amongst boys out there as a true freshman, and he's already 6'4", 225. So it's definitely a strong suit for Nebraska, especially a team the past previous years. They've had these players they bring in, whether it's Billy Kemp or Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks, these transfers that have high expectations and don't really live up to those, whether it be their play or quarterback play, whatever like that. But I do think that Dane Key is the best receiver Nebraska's had since Trey Palmer.
Whew, that would be a big season. And I'm
not saying he'll get 1,000 yards. I mean, that's his goal.
No, I like it because I could see it. I'm just we gotta yeah, I mean, he's got the talent. I mean, look what he did at Kentucky with Brock Vandergriff or whatever his name was throwing in the ball. I mean, he still put up numbers in the SEC. But I like it, and I very well could see Nebraska could have 2,000-yard wide receivers on this roster. I mean, they really could. Now, that's going to be a lot to ask, especially when I'm throwing out the Heinrich Haarberg prediction, but there is a path to that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Bonner has to offer this year. He just earned that single-digit number, of course, so you got to expect at least bigger workload out of him. I mean, he's behind Ja'Cory Barney. Of course, we know Barney's going to get a bunch of snaps. So I'm curious to see how Holgorsen incorporates him into, these packages and stuff. And I'll probably let Bobby talk more about that because you probably have a better idea. But he's someone I'm really high on for like a lot more growth.
You mentioned Bonner, and the guy, I don't think he's going to put up crazy statistics, but I like what you point out there, because when it's heavy package, we saw it at USC last year where it really started, where, he'd be listed as a wide receiver, but you'd see him kind of sometimes just come in and crack block on inside zone, which is key. And he is the best blocking receiver on this roster. I mean, he played fullback Matt Rule's first year. But yeah, I could see him being that guy. You might line him up as a wing, almost as a hybrid H-back type role, where you run an RPO and Raiola just flips it out to him and you get 7 yards. And I think that's a crucial key to Nebraska's game, especially once you get in the Big Ten play. So Bonner will play a role, and it might come down to if an Isaiah Hunter ain't blocking worth a damn on the perimeter, well, might have to go to Janier and Bonner. I mean, that's not ideal for Nebraska, considering Isaiah Hunter is a better receiving threat. But then again, last year, Alex Bullock was playing a lot of snaps just to block. So
he kind of reminds me of like a Chancellor Brewington from a few years ago.
And they ran that a lot with that crack block on the goal line. I mean, that was about Nebraska's only play they could do in short yardage, but it worked. So, I think Bonner is definitely one of those type of guys, especially in the fourth quarter. If Nebraska is driving down the field, that might be a kind of guy when you're doubling up a Ja'Cory or a Dane Key. Well, you could always check it down to Bonner and maybe get 7-8 yards to move the chains, which would be critical. Let's touch on the running backs really quick, and then we can kind of give us some thoughts on the special teams. Anyway, I mean, we all had a great idea, especially after watching the Big Red preview, of what it would be. Mekhi Nelson, clear number 2 running back, and then Mosey, the 3. But that's kind of what were your takeaways so from getting an actual view of it? I know Kwinten Ives is on the depth chart, but
yeah, no real surprises there. Maybe a little bit surprising there's not like a or listed by Mekhi Nelson or Isaiah Mosey, but it's really always been those 3 ever since Ives went down in that one practice. They've all talked about how well Mekhi Nelson and Isaiah Mosey have really just separated themselves from the pack, and how like you got to feel bad for Kwinten Ives for sure, as there was nothing he can really control in that. But the two players, they're very coachable. I mean, Isaiah Mosey is a coach's kid. I know EJ Barthel, the running backs coach, mentioned that the other day, on how Mosey would be in the backgrounds of drills, like just practicing by himself. And then Mekhi Nelson was also just been called a good note taker and everything like that. So it's obviously a very inexperienced group outside of Emmett Johnson. And even with Emmett Johnson, has a bigger workload than he's used to getting already. So it'll be interesting to see how they play out, but no real surprises to me on the depth chart.
Yeah, no doubt they're just going to feed Emmett Johnson a lot. And I know he's only a freshman, but one guy, he's not even on the depth chart, but Connor Booth. I know we saw him a few weeks ago, and I think all of us were really pleased with what we saw. And I haven't been to many practices since then, but he's someone that maybe not this year, but in the years to come, he could emerge, once Emmett leaves and who knows with transferring. But he's someone, I mean, I wouldn't count him out. He might be the 5th or 6th guy right now, but who knows? He could jump up to 3, maybe even 2 if something happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm high on Connor Booth too. I honestly thought I'd see him ahead of Ives on the depth chart just because of his injury. But I mean, Barthel pointed out on Wednesday that they're going to count on Kwinten Ives still, and I mean, it's tough for him that battling, but now he might get a chance. He might get 3 or 4 carries against Cincinnati, and that we'll see. I think he has like 3 carries for 6 yards or something in his career, something not worth writing home about. He had the touchdown in the Pinstripe Bowl, but are we going to see that? Because he's been in the program. We've heard about Kwinten Ives. This is his 3rd year in the Nebraska football program. Now, what are we going to see? Because I mean, normally you see a running back right away when they're a running back. We saw Amir Abdullah from the get-go. Even Divino Zigbo played as a freshman. I know he didn't really come on strong till his junior and senior year, but still you saw glimpses. We haven't really seen that with Ives, and that's why I'm on the Mekhi Nelson train. I'm on the Isaiah Mosey train, because you watch them run, and then you bring up Connor Booth. Those are guys that they can hit a hole and get after it. So anyway, let's look at the special teams really quick. We kind of figured, it'd be between Kyle Cunanan and John Hull as the place kicker. Rule mentioned today, right now they probably roll with Cunanan. But I guess kind of what are your guys' thoughts on what you've seen?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised they haven't decided on a kicker yet, just because last week in Mike Eckler's press conference, he said by the end of next week we'll have our kicker and we'll roll with them. But clearly, end of next week, still to be determined on the kicker. But I think honestly, both of them might kick some field goals this year, depending on how the one they tried out first does. I can see this battle really just depending on the week and depending on who can convert on these longer field goals.
Yeah, I would probably give Cunanan the nod for the first few weeks at least, just to see what there is. Because I mean, John Hull, he had some really bright spots last year. I mean, there were still some flaws, of course, between him and Alvano. Alvano was hurt last year, so I think what the special teams kind of needs is a fresh start, at least start the season. You can always go back to Hull and even Alvano, but if I was Eckler, I would probably let Cunanan get week 1.
Yeah, and of course there ain't no shock that the Gallic is going to be the long snapper with the transfer. Arguably Nebraska's most important position on special teams this year. And then, but yeah, kick returners, it's going to be Mosey, it looks like. I know they have Kenneth Williams and Mekhi Nelson also there, so I'm assuming we'll get to see all 3 of them at some point. And then, of course, we figured Jacory was going to be the punt returner. So, I mean, I'm excited to watch this special teams unit, especially punt returning. I know a lot of people are excited to watch the kicking. First thing I want to see, and even more than Archie Wilson punting, I want to see Jacory Barney field a punt and see what he does. I want to see 5 guys chasing after him down the line and see if he's going to fair catch it or if he's going to try to get 5 yards, because that's something that we haven't seen in a punt returner. I'd say, J.D. Spillman. I'll give it to J.D. Spillman. Maybe Cam Taylor Britt, but last legitimate punt returner Nebraska really had that caused hell was DeMornay Pearson-El.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how Ja'Cory Barney does returning punts this year. I mean, last year they would just throw out Isaiah Garcia Castaneda to literally fair catch the ball, don't muff it, and just really left a lot of yards on the table. And while he didn't mess up until the Iowa game, it still just really set the offense back when you have the chance of getting a first down already, or even more than that, on a single punt return and just advancing the offense. So Corey Barney has high hopes for this year as punt returner. Mike Eckler's teams have always had great punt returners in the past. So it's just a matter on if this can carry over to Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska is a staple point for Fair Catch University. So, I mean, if Mike Eckler can end that trend, all props to him, which I think he will. But still, we've heard things about special teams for years of how they're going to be improved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my favorite part about special teams is going to be watching Eckler on the sideline, man. He just makes you want to run through a brick wall with that energy. That's whew.
Well, actually, when they had the depth chart, I think they listed you, Alex, as the fifth punt returner, actually, what we're looking at.
I don't know. Sean Callahan looked pretty solid there, so he might be ahead of me.
Well, anyway, we'll close out the show. Yeah, be sure to follow these two on Twitter. Pay attention to both our coverage with the Daily Nebraskan, and then follow Anthony and I also with our coverage for Husker Online. Anthony's covering both volleyball and football right now. I'm covering primarily football, but there's a lot of good stuff. Alex is going to be doing I believe an opponent scouting report on Cincinnati for the Daily Nebraskan. So be sure to keep up with us and shoot us some comments below. But I guess you boys ready to roll out to Arrowhead? I know we're still waiting with our fingers crossed to get approved for our credentials, but
yeah, let's do it.
I'm excited.
So, all right. Well, we'll be back next week.